This is a tough segment to take. Gaza pediatrician and mother loses 9 of 10 children after Israeli airstrike hits their home, hospital says. So this is the headline. We're going to get more information on this from this Gaza doctor. In a searing interview with the BBC, pediatrician Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan condemned the broadcaster for echoing Israeli government talking points as she recounted her harrowing experience in Gaza. So she starts this out by giving some more detail as to the event that I just described very briefly using this headline. So let's take a look.
Accompanied Dr. Al-Najjar to I understand that you know the doctor who accompanied Dr. Al-Najjar to identify her children who had died in this attack. What are you hearing via that doctor?
Thank you. Just to clarify, I was in Gaza with the charity Medical Aid for Palestinians, although I also do work for Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF. So Dr. Ala worked in the emergency department of Al Nasser Hospital, or works in the emergency department of Nasser Hospital. She was on call the day that her children were killed yesterday. She was taken to the hospital by her husband, also a physician, to work in the pediatric emergency department. Her husband went home, and my understanding from her colleagues, my colleagues in the building where we all worked, including Dr. Ala, is that as soon as her husband got home to be with the children while his wife was at work on call in the emergency department, the home was struck. Dr. Ala received word that her children's bodies were brought to the hospital. So she went down with my colleague to identify the bodies. And my colleague and friend, an intensive care doctor who was with Dr. Ala, told me that she couldn't look at the bodies, that they were charred and disfigured and dismembered beyond recognition. And you know, this is a systematic pattern.
Okay, so it is a systematic pattern. If this were not a systematic pattern, if this were an isolated incident in a normal, sane society, one story like this should shock the conscience of the entire nation, and we should demand an immediate stop to this. But it's not an isolated incident. As the doctor mentions here, this is part of a systematic pattern, an attack on healthcare workers. Notice this woman's husband was a healthcare worker as well, right? Now, I know what the defense is going to be. Well, he was a combatant. Well, it doesn't seem like he was a combatant. It seems like he was a physician at this hospital, which lends a lot of credibility to something that people have been saying a long time, which is that hospital workers, healthcare workers are being targeted.
Because it's a genocide.
Because it's a genocide. Exactly.
There's a group of renowned documentary makers who made a documentary commissioned by the BBC on attacks on healthcare called Medics Under Fire. The production's been delayed several months, and I would really like to urge the BBC to push for its release as soon as possible. This needs to be documented.
Okay, so this interview, I should have mentioned this. This is on the BBC. So she's calling out the network on the network.
This needs to be made public. People need to understand that civilians, their families, healthcare workers are being intentionally and deliberately killed. And
Dr. Hassan, I just want to say, I'm not privy to the reasons why that documentary hasn't been released, as you say. Let me just repeat what you probably heard me say, that the IDF have said in their statement regarding this attack in Khan Yunis. They've said that the IDF evacuated civilians from this area for their own safety, and they are now reviewing the claim, as they put it, regarding harm to uninvolved civilians. You've been a paediatrician for a long time.
Yes.
How would you characterise, if you can, and I can hear the distress in your voice, how would you characterise what you're seeing in Gaza when you go there to work?
So first of all, in response to that retort or that supposed justification, we've been hearing these for 19 months, and half of the time they're lies and they're subsequently debunked. We know there are lies, and the rest of the time, frankly, they're just preposterous. Every 35 of 36 hospitals in Gaza have been targeted. The hospital I was working in, the same hospital that Dr. Ala was working in, was hit with a drone strike while I was there. Just the floor above me, killing 2 patients and injuring several others. It has been hit twice since then. So twice since March 23rd, that same hospital has been hit. My colleague, who I just mentioned to you from the pediatric intensive care unit, called me and it left me messages in tears telling me that the ICU is full. In fact, I can read her message to you. She says, the terror is all night and all day, continuous fear. She herself lost half of her family, her sister and her entire sister's family recently. She said, we miss our loved ones and don't even know how to grieve for them. We don't have time to grieve. So to hear even airtime being given to these preposterous justifications by the Israeli spokespeople, when every single credible human rights organization, every single credible humanitarian organization is coming on delivering the same consistent message, saying this is consistent with genocide, saying that these are crimes against humanity, saying that civilian and humanitarian infrastructure is repeatedly and systematically targeted. I just don't even understand why we're giving these claims airtime anymore. Instead of focusing on credible organizations who are bravely...
Dr. Hassan, we certainly do that. We certainly do that. And indeed, in the last week, we've also been reporting on how allies of Israel, namely France, Canada, and the United Kingdom, have been extremely critical of Israel's renewed military operation in Gaza. But you will understand why we have to reflect what the IDF says when we go to them for a statement. Just finally and briefly.
Okay, first of all, no, I don't really understand why you have to reflect what the IDF says. I also don't understand why you have to cut her off while she's explaining the horrible realities of what happened. And this whole conversation is kind of a metaphor for what the doctor just referred to, which is the censoring of this documentary. We have more of that interview, a little bit more, that we're going to play in just a couple of minutes. But I have to just detail this. Doctors and whistleblowers in delayed Gaza film threaten to pull out. So doctors and whistleblowers who featured in a much-delayed Gaza documentary that the BBC was accused of censoring by Susan Sarandon, Gary Lineker, and other cultural figures are threatening to withdraw their consent due to the refusal to broadcast the film. So Dr. Hassan actually misspoke slightly when she said that they're delaying the production of the documentary. The documentary is produced. It's in the can. It's been viewed by the BBC. It's been viewed by their legal team. It's been deemed suitable to go, and they are just sitting on it and not airing it. So it has been made. This month, it emerged that the BBC had shelved broadcasting Gaza Medics Under Fire, which was ready to air in February, until it finishes investigating a separate, unrelated film called Gaza: How to Survive a War Zone, which was pulled from iPlayer after it emerged its young narrator was the son of a Hamas official. Now, they linked that text to a previous Guardian article, because whenever you see Hamas official, you know there's bullshit going on. So who was this person? The narrator was the son of the deputy minister of agriculture in the Hamas government. So it was not a combatant, not a fighter. Hamas official, I mean, a garbage man is technically a Hamas official in Gaza if they work for the government. Okay, so this was not a combatant. It was the son of the deputy minister of agriculture, not the son of a combatant or a militant. And for that the narrator of the film was the son of a government worker in Gaza. They scrapped that documentary and used that as justification to say, hey, we need to take a closer look at this other one as well. It's been ready for almost 4 months now, and they have not shown it. With some BBC staff now concerned at how politically sensitive the issue has become, The Guardian has learned that some of the contributors to Gaza Medics Under Fire, some whom likely took risks to talk to Basement Films, the company that made the program, are now considering withdrawing the consent they gave for their appearances to be used. In addition, other broadcasters and platforms have offered to air the documentary instead, but that move has been vetoed by the corporation. So I did some further research into this. I couldn't find details, and the BBC probably keeps this information private. But just like any film studio, the BBC can choose to option a script or a film. So an option is basically if you're a screenwriter and you write a Frankenstein script and Paramount likes it, but they're not sure they can get it made, they'll give the screenwriter $100,000 to option it for a year, meaning they will have exclusive production rights to that screenplay for 1 year. So if they don't make it in a year, you still get paid the $100,000, and then you could shop it somewhere else. That's probably the arrangement that they have here. They probably own the film for a certain period of time, which means they have exclusive broadcast privileges, and they're sitting on it, which not only prevents it from being seen on the BBC, but because they have those rights for the time being, which is my assumption based on the article. I haven't seen this in writing, but this seems to be the kind of deal that it is. Nobody can see it, because they can't release it to another broadcasting company, which means nobody gets to watch it. Let's see. Meanwhile, In response to the BBC's decision to continue delaying its medics film, Basement Films, which was founded by a former editor of Channel 4 News, Ben DePere, is now running films from other doctors in Gaza on its social media. A spokesperson for Basement Films says, "We apologize again to those who trusted us with their stories. Understandably, many of the contributors and those who filmed for us in Gaza are starting to reconsider their consent for the film. Now it is months delayed, despite being signed off and lauded by some senior management at BBC News." So, yeah, it's a horrible break for this film company because they are kind of stuck answering to the people who risked great personal harm to be a part of this film. Now this film is being sat on, and there's nothing they can do about it. But the BBC anchor here insists that she has a responsibility to give the IDF side of the story, as if she's being even-handed. You're not being even-handed. First of all, you barely let her get a sentence out when she is talking about the horror that happened. You interrupt saying, "Now, just so you know, the IDF says none of what you're saying is true." But look at big picture. They censored a documentary about this very issue, about medics under fire in Gaza. They've been sitting on it for almost 4 months. And just a few days ago, you had a pediatrician have 9 bodies of her own kids brought to her hospital. Think of the just unimaginable horror of that.
Yeah.
All right.
Theoretically, in terms of what journalists are supposed to do, she's not wrong per se, but would she do that if this were a story about Russia and Ukraine?
Exactly.
Would she do that if this was a story about China?
Right.
Certainly not. So they don't play by those rules. If they did, the public might still respect them.
Exactly. I thought the same exact thing. When they're interviewing someone who, supports, funding Ukraine, and they talk about the war crimes committed by Putin in Russia, does she cut them off and say, now the Russian Ministry of Defense says that's not true? No,
and she never would.
Never would. Oops, sorry. I muted that here.
What's the most pressing thing that Gaza needs in medical terms?
An end to the bombing. And of course, accountability for all of these crimes, including the complicity of countries, of institutions, of individual politicians who have been allowing this to continue for 19 months. When we've experienced genocides of the past, and we've avowed as a people to say we're not going to allow these things to happen again, and yet we've allowed them to happen for 19 consecutive months now.
Well, it's incumbent upon me, of course, to say that the Israeli government continues to state that genocidal acts are not taking place in Gaza.
You don't ask the perpetrator, the perpetrator of genocide.
We have to ask the Israeli, Dr. Hassan, we have to ask the Israeli government for their response to these things. And that is, as you know,
you don't have to repeatedly
that's not going to age well.
Yeah. No, well, that's true too. But you also don't have to repeatedly butt in the middle of her recounting this story. Someone who personally, worked in hospitals in Gaza with now, just so you know. Again, look at the context. They're not even airing a documentary.
This is increasingly becoming, I'm going to get yelled at if I don't start arguing with you.
Of course.
She's using the G word.
Exactly. So jump right down
I
her
have
throat.
to pretend there's room for debate.
Right. Exactly. You could say at the end, I'm obligated to say the IDF refused these claims, if you have to say it. And again, you wouldn't say it in any other context. But if you have to say it, you say it then. You don't cut her off 3 times in the context of censorship of a documentary addressing this very issue.
Sorry to talk across you, but as you know, that is the response they give, and that is what we are reflecting.
I would appreciate it if you also, in addition to that response, mentioned that Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders, Human Rights Watch, the International Court of Justice would all beg to differ.
And also, we have reported as well, in only March, we reported on a number of instances whereby UN officials, including the Special Rapporteur to Gaza, have described genocidal acts as taking place, and we have reported that. Tanya Haj Hassan, thank you so much for talking to us from Jordan.
That's big of you.
And she was amazing. Like, under these circumstances, she kept very focused. She kept her facts straight. She didn't get thrown off by getting interrupted. She was. I mean, that was amazing. She
No,
did an amazing job in that interview.
yeah, she did an amazing job. Absolutely. I mean, the strength of these people is just unbelievable, unbelievable. And I would say, this is not to be construed as financial advice. But I would say, if there is like if there's a therapy app that hooks people up with therapists, that comes out, that's probably a good
Well,
investment. I'm
there
sure there
are
are
apps
many of
like that.
them. I'm sure there
Yeah.
are many of them. That might be a good investment because a lot of people like that news anchor are gonna be in need of serious psychological help sooner than later. I think when history is written and it's as obvious to people in retrospect as it should be now. There are a lot of people who are going to have to ask themselves, wow, to not piss off the boss, I had to harangue this doctor, this
Right.
incredibly brave woman who risks her life on a routine basis going to hospitals to treat people while the floor above them is being hit with a missile. I really had to fucking cut her off 3 times to remind her that the Nazi IDF refutes her claims based on no
Yeah.
evidence whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
this is gonna be hard. I'm trying to get during my hosting gig. I won't name the name; that wouldn't be proper. But I'm trying to get someone who can speak to the effects of trauma and parenting and childhood and the psychological effects of going through this, both going through it for real, as in being there physically, but also on the periphery of this Gaza issue. The psychological trauma it's inflicting on everybody who pays a modicum of focus to this, including, yeah, man, including these fucking hack anchors and hosts who just carry water for Israel. These people, they're just hair and makeup. That's all they are. I don't think they have any convictions. At some point it's going to get to them. At some point it's going to get to them, and I think the whole world is going to have a crisis of conscience about this. Very,
Well, it's
very
not.
soon. Hey, if Bono's speaking out, we're close.
Well, it's not just a question of them personally being affected by it because suddenly they grow a conscience in the midst of their lifelong careerism. Uh, they're going to wind up being so socially maligned and ostracized as boomers who grew up in a world where to question Israel was synonymous with anti-Semitism, and ABC would do the 30th anniversary special with Babs there hosting. We're not living in that world anymore. Those people are going to die, and the
Right.
younger generation overwhelmingly sees what's going on here. And in the end, these people are going to be accountable. Look, I mean, just like the whole cable news thing that's on life support, all these people, fucking Joe and Mika, all these disgusting creeps, they're going to wind up being mocked at best and really, really picked apart for their crimes at worst. And I think particularly when you get people who stuck their necks out to defend Israel in this moment, they're not going to be welcome in polite society.
Hey, thanks for watching our video. We're currently raising money to produce our documentary film on the Uhuru movement. Go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in.
Every dollar you give goes towards the project. We do not take any kind of salary on these. We mostly live on Gatorade when we're on the road, so even solid food is iffy, just enough to get by. But we do not take any pay for this. Every dollar actually goes into what we need to shoot the project. The Uhuru movement is a subject that really deserves more exposure. Everybody heard about it through the court case, and that was an important thing to elevate. But they've done incredible community work demonstrating a different way that is socialist and not dependent on the government at the same time, which a lot of people don't even realize that still exists in the tradition of the Black Panther food and education programs. And to show there is such a strong community like that with such strong leadership is really important, particularly at this historical moment.
Yeah, so we're really excited about doing the project, but we need your help. So go to givesendgo.com/do dissidents to chip in. Thanks very much for your support.